Hey, this is South African Communist Party by Marcus Reichley, Samuel Corrales, Aidan Check, Damian Buns, and Braden Tamblin. So here we go. South African Communist Party, the SACP, was formerly known as the Communist Party of South Africa, the CPSA. The party was founded in 1921 in Cape Town, South Africa, and the two main major events that shaped the party were the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and the growth of the labor movements after World War II. So after World War II, we saw a huge influx of socialist revolutions come about, and this was all inspired by Lenin right here. And this is the Bolshevik Revolution. This Lenin's ideas and his adoption of the Marxist philosophy really affected a lot of other countries, including South Africa. Oh, sorry, I didn't know that I can do that. Labor protests from the whites rose, and the Communist Party of South Africa, the CPSA, had to side more with the racist labor movement. So in the beginning, it was mostly white miners that were communist, and in order to get support, in order to get votes for their party, the CPSA really sided with the white miners and was very discriminating against blacks. So in the beginning, ironically, they were insanely white. And yeah, they led to a lot of protests, and these protests eventually led to the Rand Revolt, where 22,000 white workers, and these are mostly miners, armed against the state, which led to 200 being killed. And up here you see that these are some fighters of the Rand Revolt. Now, eventually the party did change, and this mostly came from the Communist International Committee, and that's shortened for the Comintern, and it has a Russian translation, but it's insanely complicated. But Jan Smuts was the person who was responsible for putting down the original Rand Rebellion, and because of this, he was punished by white voters because he was seen as someone who crushed down the people and only cared about the rich, because these people were fighting for equal rights, or not equal rights, but just better working conditions, because they were white, they got pretty good rights, they just weren't getting paid much. And this led to his party, the SAP, losing power in the 1924 election. And so a lot of the white aristocrats in South Africa were afraid of losing power because the SAP was out, and so they formed the South African Labour Party, SALP, which replaced the SAP and competed with the Communist Party, the CPSA. So this became the CPSA's main competitor. And the SALP was able to seize power and swayed the white workers to vote for them. Now, this was a problem for the Communist Party. So under orders from the Comintern, the Global Organization of Communist Parties, and this all based out of Moscow, and this is a meeting of it right here. Under orders from them, the party shifted its focus from white miners to African proletarians, and proletariat is a communist word for pretty much worker or slave, kind of. And by 1925, majority of the party was actually African. The Communist Party had, and a number of black communist parties, a number of the CPSA members who were black also joined the ANC. However, in the 1930s, the ANC turned very conservative, and this resulted in a lot of them going back. But we'll see later on they transitioned back to the ANC, and this is actually a way for the whites to take down a lot of the ANC leaders. If you link them with communists and you say, oh, they went to communist meetings in the past, that's a pretty good excuse to put them in jail forever. And in the early years, the CPSA the Communist Party of South Africa was really slow growing due to it was non-racial and non-radical approach, meaning they wanted to cross. And this is under orders from the Comintern. They were supposed to cross all racial boundaries. In the Comintern, they wanted whites and blacks to be together. And we see this in a lot of communist philosophies. There's no religion. There's not really a stress on race either. It's kind of everyone's equal, And so the party had a slow upbringing. But after the end of the World War II, the party had begun to build up a successful mixed coalition of different unions and federations. So yeah, after World War II, things changed a lot, mostly because the Soviet Union became a dominant world power that was able to really change the fate of the CPSA and change the fate of how the world reacts to communism. The National Party, the NP, began to view the CPSA as a threat, and it claimed it was part of a global communist conspiracy because, again, this is after World War II, 1950s, even in the United States, we saw McCarthyism and we saw a lot of people freaking out about communism. So Daniel Malin, an Afrikaner nationalist, took office as prime minister in 1948, and he was strongly against communism, and he voiced his opinion throughout the whole world that he was strongly against communism. And because of this, South Africa, being part of the British Commonwealth, was a Soviet Union ally in World War II. But we saw this as soon as he took office, 1948, South Africa immediately severed all diplomatic ties with the Soviet Union. And in 1950, they passed the Suppression of Communism Act, which essentially made the CPSA illegal. And in 1953, the party changed its name to the South African Communist Party. And this was to it was already a changing party. It was different. It changed significantly from its roots. And it wanted to show that it was more primarily about South Africa now, and not necessarily about international as it was in the beginning. Now this is the downfall of the party, and it really brought down the ANC and MK with them too. The creation of the Umkhonto we Sizwe MK in 1961 was strongly influenced by the South African Communist Party, the former CPSA, now SACP. And a lot of these leaders were also members of the ANC, and we saw this in people like Mandela or Sisulu. And the decision to launch an armed struggle had been taken at a secret Communist Party conference held in Johannesburg in December 1960. And this is post Sharpeville. And so even the Communist Party, major ANC leaders were present at the conference, such as Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu, and this created a lot of trouble for them later on in the future. An SACP delegation was sent to Moscow in 1962 to negotiate with the Soviet Union to fund their armed resistance. So a lot of the MK was funded by the SACP, and the SACP, being communist, they went to Moscow and they were able to get funds from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was hoping that the same way the United States gives money to certain rebels in certain countries because we want that side to win. Same thing with the Soviet Union. They want there to be a socialist revolution. And they managed to secure funding, training, and other support for the MK. And during the trial, the Rivonia trial, leaders like Mandela or Sisulu, or pretty much all the ANC leadership, they were all linked with the SACP. And a lot of them, Mandela including, falsely denied having any affiliation with the SACP, and this was just a flat-out lie. However, he did admit that a relationship existed between the two parties. And after life sentences were handed out, to the accused. So here's all the accused right here, and all these guys, I believe one of them didn't get charged a life sentence, but that's it. And again, it's a mix. Some of them are Jewish, some of them are black. It's a mixed. Communist Party is mixed, and pretty much all of them were sent to life sentences. Here's Mandela right here, and after this, the ANC suffered a terrible loss of leadership, which resulted in a very slow movement. And the SACP still continued to establish guerrilla fronts, so they still funded guerrilla fronts and armed resistance, and they still remained in secret contact with the Soviet Union even after the trial. So yeah, they had a huge role in the other parties, especially the MK, and pretty much because of the SACP, all the ANC leaders, and again Mandela included, were arrested because they were able to link them to communism and link them to the SACP, which had been talking to Moscow. So they were able to link them to conspiracies to overthrow the country. And yeah, that's my presentation.